Looking at political parties, we are discussing a two-party system, and today's two parties are Democrats and Republicans, obviously. But did you know they're also organized into state political parties? And there is a local Henderson County political party, and they all collaborate and organize to promote voting, to raise awareness about political issues, and of course to work for their party's interest. And so the two parties are organized at the local level. Again, there's a Henderson County Democratic Party, a Henderson County Republican Party. At the state level, there's North Carolina versions of both. And then, of course, at the national level. Now, the National Committee, I wanted to define this for you guys. The National Committee contains representatives from the 50 state party organizations who run a political party. And so the National Committee, for example, the Democratic National Committee has a chair. That means someone who organizes all of the events. And they also have a head of that particular political party. If that party has a sitting president, for example, the head of the Republican Party currently is Donald Trump. The National Committee is made up of representatives from every single state, and one of their primary purposes is to raise funds. Well over $1 billion was spent in the last election, and that was paid for through campaign contributions. It's also the job of that party's National Committee to organize their national convention. And so at the National Convention, every 4 years, that party selects who is going to be their candidate for president. But they're also deeply involved in selecting who are going to be particular political candidates in small local and state elections as well. Again, they're run by a chairperson. Now, each party recruits candidates. They may seek you out, you may seek them out. They also create advertisements. Those are the campaign commercials that you see or the ads you see on social media. And these national conventions, once more, are held once every 4 years. And at these conventions, delegates nominate candidates for the president and vice president. Now, as you know, the primary process can take 6 months to a year, where these different hopefuls will compete for votes to see who is going to be the next candidate in a presidential election. Now, each party also has delegates. Some states use a popular vote to determine who is going to be that state's nominee for the political candidate. North Carolina does that. However, the state of Iowa has a caucus. A caucus is a meeting of different political party members, representatives of that party from all over the state. And they meet there and they conduct party business. At these meetings, they write down the party platform, which, if you remember, a platform is just the stated values and beliefs of that party. Now, also, once the person running, once the candidate is chosen, there's a campaign committee, in fact, at the congressional level. And they are involved with helping to elect party members. They help to raise money. And the focus, once more, is to not just elect a president, but to elect members of their party into state and local offices. And this committee also, this party also works to elect candidates for national office. But once more, there's a Henderson County Democratic Party, there's a Republican Party of Henderson County. You can research and find out, and I hope that I Side With quiz was helpful, but you can research and find out candidates, political party affiliation at the state, national, and local level. Next, a precinct. A precinct is a geographic area that contains a specific number of voters. We are part of a voting precinct. We are in the same precinct as Transylvania County, and if memory serves, part of Buncombe County. And that precinct is drawn by the Republican Party because they are currently in power in the state of North Carolina. So once more, it's a geographic area containing a specific number of voters. We are the only ones who would vote to decide whether or not Representative Cody Henson gets to keep his job. Only people in our precinct vote either for or against that person. In fact, the same with Congressman Meadows. Congressman Mark Meadows represents our precinct at the national level. Now, you guys have a different polling place than I do. My polling place is near my home in Transylvania County. You guys might go to one in Edneyville, you might go to one in Crab Creek, you might go, it just depends on where you're living. But these precincts are run by precinct captains. For example, when I go vote in November, I'll go to the Little River Town Hall. It's a tiny little place off Crab Creek Road where I go to vote. And whoever is running that particular voting center would be a precinct captain. Now, several of these precincts together make up a ward. And this is an important term to understand. A ward is several neighboring precincts that make up a larger unit. So for example, we might be connected with the other Western Carolina precincts because we often vote in a similar fashion. And so those would make up a ward. Again, a larger political. The precinct is the smallest political unit in our country. In terms of elections, ward is the next. Now, each county, Henderson County included, is going to have a committee. Within a state, counties are the largest political unit aside from the state organization. So your most local is going to be your precinct. That is Little River or Edneyville or whatever little town or municipality that you live in. And then you've got Henderson County, the larger government, and then of course the state. There's a county chairperson in Henderson County that is an elected official. And so they have to run, they have to get your votes. We need to meet this person, so try to get them in here sometime. Now, the local political organizations are what we call the grassroots. You know, it's at the local level where many big ideas are started. And so these precinct and ward leaders build up the party here. You know, it would be very difficult for us to get the President of the United States to come in. It would be very easy, however, to get our county commissioner. We can probably contact them, set up a meeting, and they'll be here next week. And so that's why it's called the grassroots level. You are going to be very connected with that person. And that is the person that you can go to get things done here and to get bigger movements started. We also need to understand what political machines are. A political machine is a strong party organization. These are the individuals or groups that can control appointments, that is, political appointments at the local or the state level, and they can also deliver votes. You know, for example, the political machine in the past served an important purpose. There was a man named Roger Taney who once ran ran the city of New York as if it were a corporation. He was the boss of New York because he ran the political machines in the city, and they controlled millions of voters, meaning those millions of voters owed them their loyalty and would vote however they told, and he was able to use that to stay in power for over 20 years. We consider that harmful today because Roger Taney won multiple elections, but he did so through committing fraud. And when he was finally found out, he fled the country. So I got ahead of myself. The most famous example of corruption through political machines was Roger Taney, known as Boss Tweed.
I remember this. There was a kid in my class who did an HD thing on it.
Roger Taney controlled everything. And I always used to wonder, how did he get the loyalty of so many people? Like, why were these people voting however he told? Well, he would give them things. Say you're an immigrant off the boat, you've just arrived at Ellis Island. Well, someone, a representative from his political machine, is going to show up and say, I've got a place for you to stay, we've got a job for you, and we're going to get you on the road to citizenship. But we're also going to get you voting, and we're going to expect that you vote the way we want you to. And if you say no, well, then those opportunities go away. Or if they find out you voted differently than what you were supposed to, those opportunities go away. You're back on the street. And you do that with a large enough group of people, and you've just bought their votes. Now, the political party of Henderson County, when you become a voter, is going to reach out to you at some point, and is going to call you. And if you're unregistered, meaning you haven't registered as a Democrat or a Republican, if you're a registered independent, that party is going to try to court your loyalty. They're going to call you and personally explain why you should vote according to their party. Now, let's say you are a registered Republican or a registered Democrat. You're still going to get a call from the members of that respective party. And they're just going to want to know, hey, we want to make sure that you're voting. And I've even had them send us somewhat intimidating letters saying, we know if you vote or not. Because, by the way, whether you vote or not is public record. It's not public record who you voted for, but we can find out if you voted. And that's kind of creepy. I've had them literally send me letters and say, we noticed you didn't vote in this tiny little election recently. You better show up at the next one.
What's the consequences if you don't show up to the next one?
But next, political parties nominate candidates to run for public office, obviously. The way this is done is through a direct primary. A direct primary is an election in which voters choose candidates to represent each party in a general election. So in 2016, the primary in the Democratic Party was between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. There were others, but it came down to the two of them. The Republican Party was a little more complicated, right? Their primary was between Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, Donald Trump, and many others that I've already forgotten about. And Republicans, that is in the state of North Carolina, our direct primary rules are that you must be a registered Republican to vote in the Republican primary, or you must be a registered Democrat to vote in the Democratic primary. And then you vote to choose who you want to run in this election. North Carolina uses a closed primary system, meaning that you have to be registered in that party to vote in that primary. So if you're a registered independent, you don't get to vote in the primaries. Not all states use closed primaries, but ours does. The other states use what are called open primaries, meaning you don't have to be registered for that to vote in that party's primary. So once more, closed primary means that you have to be registered to that party, and you have to declare that a certain amount of time before the primary. And to be fair, there are arguments for and against either system. You know, the advantage of a closed primary is you don't want someone who is leaning Republican to vote in a Democratic primary, because they're going to vote for somebody random just to throw the results. But of course, the downside of a closed primary is it doesn't allow for people who might have changed their minds. Because yes, people do change their minds and may want to become politically active and vote in that primary. However, because of the closed primary rules, they don't get to. Now, how do you win a primary? There's a couple of ways. Number one, through a simple plurality. A plurality means the most votes among all those running for political office. So whoever gets the most votes wins. Perhaps that is the simplest method. There's also a majority of votes. This is a little more complicated. A primary operating with a majority means that a candidate must receive more than 50%. And then finally, the winner becomes the party's candidate in the general election. Next, so we're going to have an election, a presidential election. It's a big deal. It's all over the news and social media. You can't get away from it, obviously. Think of 2016. But did you know, and we talked about this yesterday, there were also unaffiliated candidates. There are third-party candidates. And weren't there some random ones? Didn't Snoop Dogg run, or D's Nuts ran, if you remember that? Like some really silly things. Yeah. There was a cat or something that they ran as a joke. There's just always silly things. And all you have to get your name on the ballot is a petition. A petition is a formal request for governmental action. These candidates can get on the ballot for the general election in most states simply by getting enough signatures.
So wait, people signed enough signatures to get a cat?
So yeah, it's a legitimate question. Are closed primaries fair? Should we use open primaries? And I think there's fair arguments on either side. So what else does the party do aside from nominating candidates? Political parties perform many functions and give you a connection to your local, state, and federal government. For example, political parties obviously spend much of their resources and time campaigning for candidates. And the election is ongoing, and these folks that are coming to talk to us are all over their precincts and states campaigning. And so you're going to hear a lot about them. You can follow them on social media, and you can kind of see where they are from day to day. Political parties also keep citizens informed. You know, you can go to your local Henderson County political party, and you can find out what local issues concern voters of this particular party. It's their job to keep us informed on these issues. And then finally, they carry out the people's message. You know, one of the most important functions that your local political parties serve is to hear what you have to say. That's, after all, why these people are coming to visit our class, because they have the responsibility to hear what you say. Because regardless of party affiliation, Mark Meadows represents you. Whether you agree or disagree with him at all, he is supposed to represent you. Regardless of political affiliation, Tom Tillis is supposed to represent you. Because after all, they are the functioning part of our government. Mark Meadows has to cast votes on laws that affect our federal government. And also, they are the watchdog. If you see something bad happening in your community, well, the first step is go to the police. But if the police say there's no law about that yet, well, then you need to get that law changed. You know, maybe, for example, hope I'm not stepping on toes here, but there was a home not far from where we live that kept dogs chained up all day, every day. Personally, that bothers me. Their dogs were just always forever chained up. And I don't know, it just kind of hurt my feelings. I was like, why? You know, I guess I get it, but there's now a policy in Transylvania County that you can't do that. We didn't make that policy, but someone did. They saw those dogs and they saw they're being neglected, and you know, they just, and granted, it wasn't just them being chained up with a comfy place, but they were like chained up and exposed to the weather. They weren't being protected. They weren't being cared for. And there was a lot of problems going on with that particular case. And now they're not there anymore because a law was passed at the local level that now you just can't do that. And then finally, our local political party is connected with the state and the nation, and they're the first place to go to. If you see something like that and there is not an existing law, they're the folks to go to get that changed.